We're going to get started for anyone that's on with the webinar in just actually about 1 minute. So we do expect a bunch of people to come in, and we'll get this going. So just wanted to come in early and say hi to everybody and make sure you know how to use the interface. And I'll make a couple of announcements on the interface as we get going. Hopefully a few others are on to hear that, and probably I'll remind people of how to use it as we go. So just about a minute. Okay, so actually it's now noon. So I'm going to get going. My name is Bill Kenny. I'm with Test My Pitch, and our topic today is building community, and that's how to diversify beyond the usual suspects. We see organizations struggle with this quite frequently, and so we wanted to really help share some of the things that we've seen work well for the organizations that we work with and that we interact with. So this is a fairly new interface to us using Blab. It may be new to you as well. There are a few kind of interesting things about it. You can join me on screen simply by knocking to come in. It says, I think, call in. Just click on that. It'll allow you to check your camera and your mic, and you can come on and join me and ask any questions. I probably will do more of that towards the end, but if you want to join at any time, you'll need to speak up because I'll have my slides on the screen for a little bit of the time. And also wanted to mention that you can ask questions at any time in the text field down below or make comment. And why don't we say that questions, just use the Q / before your question. That way we know it's a question as opposed to a comment, and it'll make it easier for us to know what to respond to. So we really appreciate you being here today. I'm going to now put my slides on screen, and we'll get this going. So just 1 second. I'm adding my slides, and you now see a lot of weird stuff on the screen. And now you should begin to see my slides. So I'm just going to put the primary slide up here. And so again, our topic is building community, how to diversify beyond the usual suspects. So our goal here, what I'm going to do is go through our agenda, which will include answering a bunch of your questions that were pre-sent in, and then I'll take the slides off the screen, and we can have any other dialogue that we want, any other questions, anything like that. So let's hop into it. And so, it's funny when we think about diversification, one of the things that comes to mind and something we see in many organizations, be they for-profit, non-profit, entrepreneurship, corporations, and so on, is that the core issue is sort of how do we overcome this sort of pale and male society we've developed, and there are some significant limitations to not doing that, not pursuing this course. And part of what we're going to talk about is exactly that. So our agenda, quite simple. We're going to talk about why to build community. What are the challenges? We'll dig into your questions. There were many great questions that were asked, that were sent in at a time. We'll share sort of what we feel are the top 3 community building tips, and then we'll have time again for any additional questions or conversation. And again, please hop on screen with us. We'd love that kind of interaction. And we don't care if you're eating lunch or whatever. I may take a swig of water as we go. So let's have some fun and enjoy this. So excuse the small print. I really just wanted to show you with this. We're not going to read it, but I want to show you the volume of questions that have been asked. And they really fall into any one of these 4 categories. So engagement, sustainability, what's the plan? How do we do it? What's the timeline? And so on. And then some questions that didn't fit into those 3 categories, we put into the other category. So So just a little bit about me, just so you know. Whoops, I didn't mean to hit that. I thought there was a picture of me that was going to come up. So in any event, you, I guess, see me on screen, so you don't need my picture. So I'm the founder of Test My Pitch, and we also have another tool called Score My Pitch. I go to about 150 pitch events a year, and so I get to see communities in various states. I'm also an active community builder, and that's a pretty broad term, but to be specific, I'm directly involved in two very, very vibrant community building efforts here in the state of Connecticut, a central entrepreneur calendar, and also a mentor cooperative. I actually started and lead those efforts. And then I'm also a part of what's called Startup Champions Network, which is an organization that's spun out of Startup America Partnerships, which came from the Obama Jobs Act. So it's essentially a national group of ecosystem builders. That's a mouthful for sure. So the disclaimer, and really it's kind of a standard thing, but you know, we're going to share what we've seen, what we've observed. We would love interaction. And I have no doubt that we haven't seen everything, but we've seen some cool stuff, and we want to share that. And certainly anything we can do beyond this to help in any way, we'd be glad to do. And so I'd encourage you not only to interact, you know, sort of during this webinar, but please, let's have some conversation afterwards directly and maybe specifically to your situation and your organization. There may be some other insights that we can share or other ways we can help or connections we can help make, anything like that. So it's hard to help if we don't interact. So it maybe first starts with that. In any event, let's dig in here. So why community build? And this is, you know, I think when you think about community building, yeah, it's been it's been sort of a buzzword for a long time, and I think the question is it fad or is it real? And ultimately, I think it really gets very simple. And without community building, you know, it's like we're trying to operate on one leg. If our community isn't diverse, if it isn't vibrant, if it isn't active and activated and engaged, then we are not utilizing all of our potential, and that really leads into potential energy. If we're not engaging everyone, if we're not getting all perspectives, if we're not adding to our understanding and the depth of understanding we have of really anything we're looking at, then we're limiting and in fact allowing our potential energy not to be utilized. So we want to take that stored energy, those people that may be on the bench or not engaged and not included, and we want to get them in the game. And that's really what this is all about. How do we unleash our true potential, our full potential? And that's our goal. So some of you may remember the Dead Poet Society with the late Robin Williams. Fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it, please go see it, rent it, whatever. But the whole idea, there was a key point in the movie when Robin Williams was teaching his class, and he stood up on his desk and he said, "Why am I up here?" And the whole point of this exercise was so that he would change his perspective, and that as he knew, you know, the students in his class every day came and sat in the same place, and he needed them to begin changing their perspective, sit in different places, stand on their desk, engage with different people, sit in a different place for lunch, all those types of things that we can do to challenge ourselves, get ourselves out of our comfort zone, and again, improve our understanding of what is. And until we engage additional perspectives or all perspectives, then our viewpoints and in fact our results are going to be limited. So the first real goal in this is to create independence. How do we help people, our community, our society, become personally and economically independent and that really comes from engagement. It comes from inclusion, and all these things. So I've had kind of the unusual opportunity to sit at a table with people from all around the world, from countries that are now war-torn, from countries that are affluent and those that are third world. And my sense is that our best foreign policy right now is the democratization of entrepreneurship. And so the idea that we can help communities become first independent and then interdependent. The idea that, in fact, an ecosystem isn't an ecosystem until there's interdependency. Otherwise, there is just a bunch of sort of siloed and sort of efforts going on. And ultimately, what we want is to create a situation where there is strength, where there is independence and vitality, sort of individually or individually by organization, and then collectively we can get even more success by becoming interdependent, by collaborating and cooperating and so on. So the challenges that we see, and there are just a few sort of major challenges we're going to focus on, but the kind of the key challenges for community building. Number one, organizations fail to start with the end in mind. In other words, they're not thinking about what do they want as outcomes, and really focusing on those outcomes and aligning their efforts to that. The second is poor time management. So many organizations sort of run in sort of event cycles, if you will, and often the cycles are too short. So they sort of almost like a butterfly hop from one event to another, and generally the amount of time they've allowed to build a successful event isn't enough. And in fact, it's difficult to keep a community together if they can't look far enough out. I can tell you, actually, from my own experience, I mentioned when I was introducing myself that I'm involved in a statewide calendar effort. And to be specific about that, we've developed a calendar where we can aggregate all of the entrepreneur events in the state. We have about 25 organizations whose events are aggregating into a central calendar automatically. Happens at 4 a.m. every morning. We just basically collect all the new information from any of the partner websites, and then we can aggregate that out not only to our own calendar, but to any other organization that would like to embed this calendar on their site. And one of the things that we're seeing is we really have an ability to help what we're calling tier 2 events do much better. And so right now, the tier 2 events, what I mean by that are events or programs that you have to apply to. In other words, most of the events are what we might call tier 1, and those are gateway events. Those are what gets people into the marketplace or gets them into the community, the greater community. And then these tier 2 events are where they can really elevate their skills and engagement and ideally prosper. And so right now, these tier 2 events, and this is really kind of key, is that they're not even really promoting them until essentially the applications for their program is very near. And so it doesn't give any opportunity for the tier 1 events to line up to that. Now, so again, to be specific, we have an accelerator in our state that is a women's accelerator. So it accelerates women businesses only. We have another one that focuses on accelerating social enterprises. Well, if they don't announce their application deadline, 6 or 12 months, I shouldn't even say their application deadline, their application opening, say 6 or 12 months in advance, or at least make us aware of it, then we can't help all the organizations that would want to run events that would feed those. In other words, that the worst thing is to have an event and then nothing. And so organizations naturally want to feed their constituents into better programs or higher level, next level type programs. And so it's really about, kind of a simple example of how time management can be a real killer if we're always on this sort of cycle of last minute planning and promotion. And it's really about how do we enable the rest of the ecosystem to do what it can do to help us, and first and foremost starts with a bit more planning and better time management. So the third issue that we see is the focus on getting credit. So I think there have been a few folks that have said over time, it's amazing what great things happen when no one cares who gets credit. And so this can really derail the idea of community building when there's a concern about the headlines as opposed to the substance of getting things done and really creating results. I don't think we really have to worry about who gets credit if great things happen. And and I'm sure there are folks that are battling for budgets and all that, but those types of things are going to really limit our ability to create engagement and build the strongest community possible. And ultimately, there is some leap of faith here that the rising tide lifts all boats, and I think leaders are generally recognized, and and again, if we don't worry about it, then we're going to move forward generally much faster, and that's a big part of this. So it is an issue that we see challenge many organizations. So we're now going to hop into the questions you submitted, and we could add sort of additional slides. But what we've done is actually embed your questions into the sort of slides that we wanted to share with you anyway. So hopefully you find this format good. And so I'm going to hop first into the engagement question. You'll see we've got, there are 10, 12, 15 questions related to engagement. I'm going to break them into a couple of groups. So the first set of questions really have to do with sort of the basic idea of how do we engage our community. And so, how do we reach outside of the pre-existing bubble? How do you build diversification of event participants? Somebody seeking tips on how to foster genuine diversity, authentic ways for a large-scale local community event to foster that genuine diversity, which is certainly, we want to be authentic and genuine. How to reach all corners of the community and across network boundaries. And then someone who's the executive producer of an annual entrepreneurship festival that engages 10,000 or more than 10,000 individuals each year. And they've accomplished great scale, but have struggled with diversity despite their best intentions. And so what are the drivers to increase diverse attendance? So I'm going to dive into that, and you'll see there are sort of several slides to I think underscore sort of the things I want to share. I'd also say that there are bits of these that will also be answered in other questions, and so there'll be a few different ways that these questions will be answered as well. So hopping into this, so inclusion, quite simply, is really about everybody being in the community, and exclusion, as you can see, there's some folks around the periphery. Segregation, there are folks off to the side, and then integration is essentially just that community put in sort of, if you will, a sub-community within the greater community. And so real inclusion is investment. It's people rolling up their sleeves together to get really good things done. So we want to make sure that we have inclusion. We want to make sure that we have alignment. And really that's about making sure that we have common goals. The term that I think really is key here is we want to find the aligned self-interest the aligned self-interest between all of the stakeholders. And that's really the glue that keeps all of this together. So making sure that you've identified, number one, the stakeholders, and then their aligned self-interest so that you can have alignment. And again, this is how you're going to create sustainability, not just, sort of quick and non-lasting engagement. It's really about that aligned self-interest. Next is ownership, and this is something that it's really funny how we see this quite often, where organizations will develop an event, sort of a new event or a new program, and then go out to the marketplace and look for support. And we've, this model repeats itself, or movie repeats itself over and over again, and that quite often fails. It's really, really a challenge. And so the key here is making sure, the only way to make sure people are sort of own something is that they're really in it from the formation stage. And so think about, maybe at some point you've had somebody move in with you, or you moved in with somebody else. You think about if somebody moved in with you, you made some shelf space for them. Maybe you cleaned out a dresser drawer for them. You gave them a little space in the bathroom, and so on. But they essentially, think about it, they moved into your space, into your house. And so you own it. They're just guests, if you will. And think about the difference between that and choosing a place together and moving into that place, and whether it's decorating it, furnishing it, all of those things that you would do when you have ownership. Think about the care you would take in maintaining a place that is yours versus one that you're a guest in. And if you want to really have people own connecting with each other and being involved, and promoting and all those things that you want in terms of driving engagement, then they have to have ownership. And the more that they're included at the formation stage or the relaunching stage, there are lots of ways to do this, and we'll talk about that as we go, but they need to have ownership. So formation is key. And so making sure that in the formation stage, we've got a diverse community. And here, obviously, we're representing probably more diversity from a ethnic standpoint, but it needs to be diversity from skill set. And certainly we see gender as well represented here as well. So it needs to be, diverse as you can imagine, from, be it industries, backgrounds, knowledge, gender, ethnicity, and so on. There's no real limit to how you might look at diversity. It really depends on who your stakeholders are, who do you want to appeal to, and they should be involved at the formation stage. So let's talk about how do we get, now that we've begun taking a look at how do we sort of engage our community, let's look at how do we actually get them to attend our events. So the questions were how to generate better event attendance and how do I create better event attendance, almost the same thing. So there are lots of organizations doing good things in this area, but the best organization that I've seen at creating good, strong, consistent event attendance, I mean, like they sell out very frequently, is Innovation Nights. And they started in Massachusetts in the sort of 128 east of 128 corridor. And they're phenomenal. They have a methodology that is like none I've seen at any other organization, and it's very smart and simple. And so if you're going to Google them, you could look up Innovation Nights or Mass Innovation Nights, either one of those. And so what they do, very simple, is they have a monthly event. Sometimes they're thematic, sometimes they're general, but it's all about innovation. And their monthly event always has 10 exhibitors. And so they have a sort of a running pool of exhibitors that they can choose from. People are constantly applying to be an exhibitor. And so they'll select maybe, say 40 days or 30 days before the event, they'll select the 10 exhibitors for an event. Then they have crowdsourced voting, and the exhibitors are responsible for driving attention to this. They have crowdsourced voting, and 4 of the exhibitors will be chosen to give a live pitch in front of the audience. And so imagine, 2, 3, 4, 500 people at this event, and you're able to talk about your innovation and engage the crowd and get support in a variety of ways. And so what this is driven is these organizations, these companies or ventures that are going to be exhibiting promote the event, in essence, by driving people to vote for them. And so they've really come up with a great way to leverage the folks who would gain from the event and to engage the people who would, first and foremost gain from the event, those individuals, organizations that would exhibit, engage them in actually the event promotion. And it is the smartest system that we've seen. And not only that, it's one we've seen consistently work really well. It's been very proven. So let's talk about this next question. So how do you make diversity an organizational priority that each employee connects with? And this is huge, right? Because this is about sustainability. It's one sort of for a short time embrace these ideas. But how do you make it so that it has some legs and can last? And I think there are a lot of points that I would make here, and certainly some we've already made about, sort of how do you get your team involved? How do you get your organization embracing this idea? And the first thing is to lead. It's really to be a leader. And I think in this context, it's going to mean being consistent through every communication in talking about the importance of being diverse and engaging the broader community. It also is going to be by action. So who are we hiring? Who are we including? Who's on our board of directors? All those types of things. It's also accountability. Leaders need to make sure there's accountability within their organization. So what are you doing to make sure that your team is embracing this as well? And so it may be identifying informal leaders, or maybe some formal leaders, and it may be department leaders, or it may be others who are going to be the advocates and the people that will carry the torch. I mean, one of the biggest things we see missing in organizations is the development of the next generation of leaders. And so quite often, whether you're in a volunteer organization, you're at a university, or you're in a corporation, people get tired. People that are leading get tired. And so if there's no sort of bullpen, number one, the bullpen is helpful because it relieves some of the need for one person to own leadership. But number two is leadership is difficult. And if we're not preparing people for the language and for the process of being a productive and valued leader, then we're going to get to this place where that sort of charismatic individual will exit, or they'll get run over by a bus, or they'll just get tired, and there'll be a huge vacuum. There'll be no one to take the baton. So I think part of this is not only about how do we sort of get our institution to embrace the community and the idea of building a diverse community today, but how do we sustain it long term? And ultimately, this all comes into sort of this idea of leadership and developing leaders. Succession is absolutely key. So let's see, how do you sustain, and this is brutal because I have something that's going right over this next question. How do you sustain? This is online engagement. I'm sorry. I can barely read it through this little shadow box that's covering it. It's just part of the screen sharing technology, I guess. So, how do you sustain online engagement? So, I think online has its own nuances, but I think generally the rules are pretty similar, right? We need to make sure that we have a good method of outreach. We have a good method of engagement. I think some of what we've already talked about really fits in here. But ultimately, it's about sort of making sure that we're delivering value And in fact, we're going to talk a little bit about some ways to make our online community sticky, and not just online, but in person, sticky. And that's actually going to be in the next set of questions. So, I think I would just say, a lot of what we've talked about really applies to in person and online. And again, online does have some uniqueness to it, and it's just really about getting familiar with how do you gain and sustain that online community. So now we lead into sustainability. So there are a whole bunch of questions here in sustainability, and we're going to kind of take them as a group and pace through them. I think we can hit them all with just a couple of slides here. So just quickly, we're working to improve community engagement with demographic groups that aren't necessarily part of our community. How can we gain their trust? Next, how do we increase engagement opportunities to get sponsors for events? Next, how do we grow and scale our community as well as improve outcomes? We struggle with balance of our events. By having such a diverse group of members, it's difficult to cater to all of their stages, industries, and relevant needs. How do you provide consistently relevant yet enticing content without oversaturating your entrepreneurs with many events? And then finally, building on a successful initial start, maintaining energy and building programs locally and across multiple locations. So let's hop into these, because I think we can do quite a bit. So when we think about sustainability, really nothing is more important than content. Content is king. Content is what attracts people, and it's also what keeps them coming back. And to be really specific about that, we're actually, the slide after this, we're going to talk about antecedents and consequences, which really leads into that. But when we look at content, we want to look at probably, and you may have slightly different stages, but as we look at organizations, this is sort of the community, what we see as the community building stages. And so you have balance, you have engage is the sort of where it starts, or you might even think of the top of the funnel of where people come in, where they enter your community. And so the goal of that first interaction, and maybe the first couple, are really that they're going to come back for a second interaction or a second event. And so it's really about how do you build it so that the expectations, that the focus is more on form, about sort of encouragement and the things that would sort of cause somebody to return, and that content and so on. And then as we go forward and move into the education phase, we're going to be more focused on substance and things that are really transformational for that particular audience. And then the final stage you could think of as exit or perform, but it's essentially a place where there is some performance, there's some next step, there's some preparation for the move outside of the program they're currently in, whatever it is, but there's some sort of endpoint that's looming and some deliverable that should be expected. I did mention antecedents and consequences, and this really, I think, ties into the idea of how important content is. So we're all familiar with specials, where the idea that someone's promoting some value, right? We can, you could think of it as your program or event. And the easy way to think of it is, gosh, we just put an ad in the paper, an ad online to buy one, get one free, right? There's some value proposition here that we're assuming there's a marketplace that wants this. And so we put it out there and we make certain promises or present certain opportunities in whatever promotion we do. So that's the antecedent. That's essentially our promise in our promotion. The consequence is the result of that. That's what do we get because we accepted the offer, because we went to Smashburger and got the 2-for-1. Now imagine that our meal experience wasn't good, whether, wherever it went off the rails, it went off the rails. It was either a bad product, it was bad service, it was not a clean environment, anything like that. It wasn't safe. It could be a whole bunch of different things. So if you think about it, if the consequences of the antecedent, the initial antecedent aren't good, does it matter what the next offer is? It would have to be an incredibly compelling next offer to get somebody to take another, it's sort of to, if you will, waste their time or money to have another experience. And so it's not only important when we think about how to build our community, it's not only important to promote well and to engage a diverse audience well, but it's also important to deliver something of high value. That way, not only do people come back, but they bring their friends, and we obviously want to engage them to bring their friends and bring their friends' friends and so on. But there's really two components of community building. Number one is this idea of we have to make a promise and we have to promote it well to a diverse audience. And number two is we have to deliver on that promise or even exceed that promise so that that the audience and the community continue to build. We need to do some assurance in terms of we want to check in with our audience to see if we're doing the right things, if they're getting out of this what they want and what they should be, and how they're progressing based on what they're gaining from our program. I think we want to know those things, and this certainly helps our sustainability. It helps us adjust. And then finally, we need to deal with succession. We need to make sure, again, that we're developing that next generation of leaders. Really, really critical that we pay attention to this, because this is not only an opportunity for us to continue to reach out to the community informal leaders and empower people to do things and to commit themselves deeper to the organization, but it's also the ability, or sort of our ability, to prepare for leadership change. And ultimately we need to not just plan for leadership change. I think there's also a benefit to leadership change, having new eyeballs and having some, the two in-state community building activities I run are 100% volunteer, and they both have no budget. And yet we have people who are volunteering for teams, are taking ownership of certain aspects of what we're doing, and we have a significant group that is investing their time, and we have a whole array of sort of informal leaders who are being prepared to take on greater responsibility and ultimately help us succeed this far beyond the first generation and the second generation of leaders who are now sort of running the two efforts. So it's really, really key. And again, it doesn't need to be a big organization with a budget to do these types of things. So the next question, or a couple of questions that were asked, were about the plan. So the plan it really needs to be looked at almost in two different ways. So one way would be for an organization that is starting something from scratch. Maybe the organization is starting from scratch. Maybe they're starting a new event or program from scratch. And in that case, you can start at the beginning. As you can imagine, it's a little bit different if you're in motion, you already have the program up and live, and then how do you build community around it? It's really somewhat a different question. So we actually, the cool thing is we actually have a plan. So the question is, what does a typical plan look like for building out diversity in a community? How long is the process of building these relationships? So we'll actually provide for everybody after this webinar our community building template, and here's just the first page of it, or part of the first page. But the community building template actually comes in a couple of, or it has a few different stages, 5 in fact. So number one is whoever the sort of founder is, or the person with the initial idea, they create a preliminary vision. And I think the wisdom of somebody that does this or has done this before knows is that the preliminary vision is it's very high level. It's 30,000 feet, 100,000 feet, whatever, but it's very high level. And it's generally, if you think about the stakeholders that you want to engage, you're including some words in this vision that identify things that would be the easy for those individuals to be excited or interested in. And so this is not more than a paragraph. It's probably not much more than a couple of sentences, but it's a preliminary vision that you can get the stakeholders or the initial stakeholders that you've identified together to have a conversation. And that could be a virtual conversation or it could be an in-person. Obviously, in-person can be a little more impactful. And so this preliminary vision is simply, it gets thrown out after this first session, but the preliminary vision is simply to get everybody together. Then from that meeting, from that initial interaction, then you can identify some goals, some things that you need to get done to sort of, if, number one is you're testing, if no one shows up, that your preliminary vision didn't resonate. So it's a really good way before you do anything to say, am I on the right track in developing something of value? If it does resonate, you get a good crowd and good interest, then it's really about asking for volunteers to develop a more formal vision. These things don't need to take time. I mean, I personally facilitated doing this in literally a matter of days and having it launched in live. So you can go at any pace you want, but it doesn't need to be slow. And then from that shared vision, you can continue to develop a variety of teams to handle various parts of formation. Maybe there are some key aspects that need to be developed, and then key parts of launching. And so again, the goal here is that the more you can form teams around accomplishing various aspects of what you need to do to both sort of develop your plan and also execute your plan, the more people are going to be involved, the more it's going to be better, because it will have you'll have anticipated the needs of a broader community than just your own vision can. And third, you're going to have leaders. They're going to be people that own parts of this. In other words, you don't have to do it all. And it's so hard if you go through sort of fully baking the cake, to get someone else to come in and promote the cake for you. You wanted them to add the ingredients and to complement the ingredients as they as this thing's getting formed. And then finally, the last thing that you'll see in this plan is some thoughts around how do you measure, grow, and sustain your community so that you can continue to perpetuate and succeed. So that's going to be a little different than how do we deal with sort of the retrofit or while we're in motion, how do we sort of engage folks? So the question that came that sort of leads us into this is, we have an alumni community that grows naturally and that is naturally diverse in terms of size and industry, but we have difficulty driving engagement in our online space as well as event attendance. How do we improve that? So retrofitting is a little bit different. And it's really about sort of being opportunistic, and every community is going to be different. And to really address this well, we probably ought to have a one-on-one conversation and talk through the issues. But I think it's really looking at where there are opportunities to augment the program and where you can engage folks that aren't in the leadership team now, that represent the underrepresented or non-represented communities that you want to engage. Get them involved in adding to your programming in some way, and again, begin getting them into the movie. It's going to be a slower, more sort of a thoughtful process, I would say, to get people sort of in and engaged, but identify those formal or informal leaders that are in the communities that you want to attract, and then begin getting them involved in key ways. And so the idea is we want to be nimble. We want to be looking at the those lever points. But again, let's talk specifically about your situation, and I'm sure we can share some other ideas that would be more specific. But I think us understanding a little more would help. So a couple of additional questions. So how do I encourage beneficiaries to become active participants in the community, moving them beyond the free rider status? And then how do I engage more volunteers so we avoid the current volunteer fatigue? So there's really a continuum of support that you want to look at. So there's, and you could make this more complex, I absolutely acknowledge, but let's think about it in three sort of general ways. One is there's pre-service. In other words, they're the people we're marketing to come to our events, to come to our program, and so on. They're one sort of opportunity, and some of them will actually become clients, some of them won't. Some of them may become advocates or could become advocates. Maybe the program's not right for them in some way. They're too early, they're too late, whatever the case is. Then there are people who are our clients, and so it's how do we give them a great experience, right? We want their consequence to be really good so that when they become alumni, we can convert them into sponsors, into volunteers, mentors, and advocates, and really utilize that potential energy of our community to engage. And I think planning for turnover, whether you're a well-funded corporation or a sort of the most simple of organizations, not even pre-nonprofit, if you will, but just a set of volunteers that are trying to do something in your community. All of this works. And so the folks that are pre-service may have been prospects, or maybe they're just interested parties from the community. They can be activated. Your clients, we need to deliver good value to them, and we need to create really good outcomes. And then those clients are potentially tomorrow's sponsors, tomorrow's volunteers, and tomorrow's mentors and advocates. Another way to look at how do we activate our community is that, celebrations are important, and there are a lot of ways to celebrate. I have an old client, not old just in age, but longtime client, who taught me a long time ago. His motto in his company was, if you can't pay them, plaque them. And so, I think that's one way to look at it. But I think another is, the celebrations you have, the people that you, or ventures, or teams that you promote through your celebrations are examples for the rest of your community. And those are things that your sponsors can get excited about, those events, and that it somewhat tells the story of success and what you've been able to accomplish, the sort of transformation that you've been able to help your community with, and your clients, if you will, with. And so there are a variety of things, but it becomes moments in times where the stories can begin to get out and help you get beyond your current community and reach potentially into other communities. So it's a way to engage really all aspects of our stakeholders, from the sponsors to maybe it's mentors or coaches or supporters in other ways, to our alumni. But those are moments when we can all come back together, and it's also, one of the best organizations I've seen at doing this. Actually, probably about half the people in the room at their celebration events are prospects for their next program, and they're really good at getting these people in the movie early, and that just causes more and more interest, and more there's sort of, what I hear from a lot of programs is we want more and better applicants, and that's exactly what this does, because they're amplifying the number of applicants, and they're showing the applicants what they can accomplish. They're tending to get better and better applicants as well, and it's a very vibrant and powerful program. So 3 quick community building tips. So the top 3 tips are: number 1, be inclusive and start at the beginning. Do it from day one. Find a shared vision. So it's really about, again, we're going to have that sort of provisional vision, or that formation vision, and then we're going to develop something that we can all sign off on and be excited about, and then leave a legacy. How are you preparing the next generation to continue with the vision? How are you helping them get ready to take over the reins and move forward? And it's really about having some incremental opportunities for them to test their ability to lead, and to sort of stretch their legs and do good things there. So I'm going to do a couple of things. We're going to get to your questions in just any additional questions or comments in just a moment. I want to share our next webinar is going to be on July 26th. It's going to be about business plan competitions. We say they're broken, and we're going to offer some ideas on what to do about them. So don't miss that. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be, I think, unless you tell us otherwise, it's probably going to be on Blab as well, and we're going to want to have some conversation, and it'll be at noon Eastern time. Two quick other things. Some of you don't know much about what we do, and just so you know, we have two online tools. One is called Test My Pitch. It's a place where students, entrepreneurs, and professionals can improve their communication skills in cohorts. So it's embedded in classrooms. Sales teams use it. It's being used at accelerators and incubators, all within the sense of a small, generally small to mid-sized cohorts. Anywhere from 10 to 50 people is sort of the norm, and they're working in a private community and developing communication skills. So think of it like Toastmasters online. Our other tool is called Score My Pitch, and it's a pitch event judging and feedback system. So it takes what's now being done on paper and puts it and records that information digitally. So we're able to capture all the wisdom in the room and convert that sort of potential energy into much better feedback for the ventures, the students, the participants than otherwise would be there. So there are really two key things. One is the results that our tool delivers are considerably more reliable than anything you would get on paper. So there's better education from that. And number two is the volume of contextual feedback that the participants get is second to none. So I am going to stop screen sharing, and I'm going to hop back over to Blab. And let's see. So I'm back here. We've got some people in. You are more than welcome to join me on screen and ask any additional questions. Or you can text them in, whatever you would like. But join me on screen if you like. It says, I forget what it says, something about call in, I think. So click on that, and then I will allow you to come in, and you can ask me a question on screen, or you can text something in. So, I'll just be entertaining here until I see someone do that. I will give you a minute or so to do that. To tell you a little bit more about some of the community building work that I do for anyone that would like to know more about it, we've developed this mentor cooperative in state, which is essentially an organization of organizations that have their own mentor networks. So we have universities, we have accelerators, incubators, various economic development organizations that all have their own, what we would call local mentor networks. And our mentor cooperative is a bridge between those mentor networks. And the whole idea is that that each mentor network has, can probably serve 95 to 99% of its mentees' needs with their own resources from within their network. And the idea really is that as there are needs that can't be satisfied by a specific organization's mentors, that those needs can be socialized with the different mentor network concierges or the leaders, the facilitators, so that some out of network support can be facilitated. And so the idea here in Connecticut is to sort of, we've got this going, we've got many organizations that are participating, and it's been really good. We've been going about a year now, and we're now open sourcing that information for anyone that's interested. If you have a mentor network and you'd like to maybe create a cooperative in your area, we'd love to interconnect, if you will, cooperatives all around the world, and we've got a great deal of interest in doing that. So if it's something of interest to you, please join us in that or ask me questions about it. So it looks like there are no additional questions. Either I've bored you all to tears, or we've actually covered the topic. I got to imagine there are additional questions. So I should let you know, we're going to follow up. I'll certainly share this video with you all. I'll share the community building template. I'd love your comments on this format and on any of the materials we provide. Your feedback only helps us get better. If there are other topics you'd enjoy, let us know. And then finally, if there are things that we can, maybe areas that we can help you with, or additional questions you have, please let us know, and we'll follow up. You'll hear from us, but don't wait for that. Just reach out and say, hey, can we schedule a time to talk, and we'll make that happen. So at this point, it looks like we've kind of handled everything that you all wanted to handle today. Don't hesitate to reach out separately, but I don't want to keep you any longer than we've promised. So have a wonderful rest of the day, and we will hopefully talk to you all very soon. Thanks so much. Bye now.